This is an interview with Mr. Michael Cocchiola, and this is part of the Italian-American World War II Veterans Project. It is February 2nd, 2005, and we are in Baldwin Borough, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. Mr. Cocchiola, will you just tell me your full name and your date of birth for the record?
My full name is Michael Angelo Cocchiola. I was born on January 16, 1919.
Cocchiola is an Italian name.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your Italian ancestry? For instance, who was it that first came over from Italy in your family?
Well, my grandfather and my father and his brothers came over from the Naples area of Italy. And my mother also came over from the La Campagna area east of Naples in Italy. They didn't know one another, but they met here in the United States and they were married later.
What was your father's name and your mother's name?
My father's name was Carmine Cocchiola. My mother's name was Angelina Giaquinto, Giaquinto. Her name was actually Angela Marie, I think, but it evolved into Angelina somehow. That's what she used, Angelina.
Where did the family settle when they came to the United States?
They settled in New Jersey, in Nutley, New Jersey.
Where is that?
That is a few miles east of Newark, New Jersey, and I was born in Nutley, New Jersey. And my mother had settled in Raritan, New Jersey, which is over by Somerville and Plainfield and Bound Brook, New Jersey. How my mother and father met, I don't know. Probably through mutual friends.
Raritan, is that close to Nutley? Are they close together, Raritan and Nutley, or are they?
No, they're about 70 miles apart, I think, something like that. But through relatives. There's Raritan, New Jersey does have a large Italian community.
John Basilone was from Raritan, or lived in Raritan.
I knew John Basilone.
Did you?
I didn't know him that well. Manila John is what they called him. He won the Medal of Honor at Guadalcanal.
Tell me a little bit about Nutley, New Jersey. Was there a big Italian community in Nutley?
Well, I don't know how big it was, but it's been very forceful. My cousins have held political office there. Right now, the mayor of Nutley, New Jersey is Joanne Cocchiola. She was elected last year. Her father was a member of the council. He's retired now, but he was on the council for a few years. My cousin, Carmen Orecchio, is on the council. He was mayor 3 times there. He was also, Carmen Orecchio was also a state senator in New Jersey for about 20 years. Then he retired. His brother Frank Orecchio was active, and his brother Carl Orecchio was a New Jersey assemblyman. Of course, they're all gone now except Carmen Orecchio. In fact, I saw Carmen Orecchio last year when I visited New Jersey for a funeral.
When you were growing up in New Jersey, was the home that you grew up in a distinctly Italian home? And what kinds of examples of the Italian culture took place in your home? Was the language present when you were growing up?
Well, yes, except my father always used to say that to my mother that you're an American now, speak English. But my mother used to start off a little bit in English, but then she switched to Italian, then she switched back to English again. So it was back. And when I called her on the telephone, why, she would switch back and forth. So we always had a little bit of Italian in us. And my mother used to like the backyard we had. She grew figs there. and tomatoes and things like that.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had an older brother, an older sister, and a younger brother, and they're all gone. I'm the only one left now.
Tell me about your early memories. Does anything stand out from growing up in Nutley? And is there any? What are your earliest memories of childhood?
Not of Nutley, because we moved from Nutley to Newark, New Jersey, when I was about 4 years old, something like that. And we lived on Garside Street in Newark, New Jersey for a while. And my dad worked at Pittsburgh Plate Glass, so he decided to build a 3-story house on Grafton Avenue in North Newark, New Jersey, and then he could walk to work. And it was 3 stories, and he rented out to 2, and there was a Elliott Street School right across the street, so it was very convenient. So when I was about 5 years old or so, that's where I was, and I stayed there and in that house until World War II came along.
Did you attend that school? It was across the street?
Yes, I graduated from Elliott Street School in 1931.
That was at a elementary school, or?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then did you go on to another school nearby?
I went to Barringer High School. Mm-hmm. I graduated from Barringer High School 1935.
When you were growing up and attending the school, obviously you probably went to school with people from whose relatives came from many different parts of the world. Was there any incidents where you were looked down upon because of your Italian heritage, or were you accepted as a member of the community and a member of the school?
We were accepted in that area. There weren't any problems, but of course, about 10 blocks or so to the east, there was Verona Avenue, and that was where you had a lot of Italians, and you had a lot of Italian food stores and all this kind of stuff. So then the Immaculate Conception Roman Catholic Church, they said their Mass in Italian. We had an Italian-born priest there. So there was plenty of Italian around.
Did you want to, when you were in school, did you want to be Italian or did you want to be American? Did you think at all about your heritage at that point in your life?
No, it wasn't that way. Elliott Street School had everything. They had different nationalities, different races, and there was no problem, never any problem.
Tell me if you remember anything about your parents' views towards Mussolini. Mussolini's coming to power in the late 20s, the 1930s. Was there any talk about Mussolini when you were younger, when you were growing up, or were your parents kind of focusing on their life here in the United States and not really Italy?
My dad primarily was focused on his life here in the United States. Like he said to my mother, "You're in America now, speak English." And fact of the matter is, my mother went back to Italy on 2 trips, but she went alone. My dad didn't want to go back particularly, but she wanted to go back. She wanted to go back to see her mother there, and that was the only reason. But when my grandmother passed away, she never went back anymore.
Tell me if you remember, and if so, what happened when you found out that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when that announcement came through?
I was in the Army at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Oh, you were already in the Army at that time?
Yes, I was inducted November 6, 1941. At Fort Dix, New Jersey.
A month before,
huh?
A month before Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, I was.
How did it come about that you entered the military?
I was drafted, and I had no choice. Although I could have gotten a 3-month deferment from Pittsburgh Plate Glass, the treasurer, he said to me, "Mike, I can get you a 90-day deferment." I said to him, I might as well go, get it over. Why wait around for 90 days? All I'd be doing is out having going away parties. So I went November 6th to Fort Dix, New Jersey.
What was your feeling when you found out you had been drafted? Were you scared? Were you proud? Were you nervous?
No, I wasn't. I was more or less indifferent to it. You see, in September 1940, my older brother Frank volunteered for the one-year service. He and 3 buddies. They got a lot of publicity in the paper. They signed up for 1 year. And so he served 1 year with the 1st Infantry Division from September 1940 to September 1941, and then they discharged him. But that didn't do him any good, because in 1942 he had to go back in again. So the 1 year service didn't get him anything. That 1 year's voluntary service was supposed to take care of your draft obligation, but it didn't work out that way.
When you were drafted and reported to Fort Dix, New Jersey, did you at that point have any idea about the scale of the conflict and America's involvement in the conflict? Did you know that this World War was going to happen and that you were going to be in the middle?
Oh yes, I felt that sooner or later. I've been following Franklin Roosevelt's Lend-Lease program and so forth, and I knew that it was just a matter of time. But the funny thing about that, I might relate this. On November 6th, I went in Fort Dix. On November the 7th, after they gave me my uniform and so forth, I was being interviewed the next day, and I'm sitting there in the interview room. I remember it was a Friday. I was inducted on a Thursday, November 6th. Friday, November 7th, I'm sitting there waiting my turn to be interviewed, and that was supposed to be to classify you in a particular branch of service or whatever. This was the Army, but whether it was going to be artillery, infantry, finance, or what. So I'm sitting there, and this fellow comes walking by. I look up. I said, Pete. It was Pete Cummings, who lived a block away from me. I used to go to his house. My brother used to go over there and play poker. And Pete Cummings was a beefy guy, big beefy guy. So he was a corporal. So he says, Sergeant, I'll take this man next. So I figured, oh boy, now I'm going to get myself a choice assignment, right? So he takes me in, I'm facing him like you and I are facing. We're sitting at a table. I said, Pete, what's it look like here? What are my choices? He puts down his pencil and he says, Mike, you're probably going to go down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to Field Artillery Replacement Training Center on Monday. I said, Pete, you haven't asked me a question. Nothing. He said, we got to fill a quota, Mike. Monday I went down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to Field Artillery Replacement Center. That was that.
Mm-hmm. Some friend he was, right?
Well, he couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
They had to fill a quota. Fort Bragg had started up the Field Artillery Training Center about, I would say, May of 1941, and they were starting to increase their schedules, and they needed men in there. So the whole group that I went in on that day, November 6th, from my area, we all went to Fort Bragg for Field Artillery.
Did you know anything about the artillery at that point in your life? Did you have any experience with it? Or
nothing.
Tell me about any perceptions that you noticed about Italian Americans once Italy went to war against the United States. Did anything happen here at that time that did people look down upon Italians because their ancestors in Italy were fighting against the United States? Did you experience that, or your parents experience that?
No, actually not. I don't think Mussolini was a factor at all. So they knew that it was Hitler. It was the brains behind the whole thing, and that Mussolini just went along with it. and the Italians were not in favor of Mussolini going to war. So we never experienced any problems. And in this group that I was inducted with, there were quite a few Italians, because they come from Newark, New Jersey, and they came from Jersey City, New Jersey, and they came from New York City. That whole group, there was a fairly good number of Italians in there.
Did they tend to, in the military, from your observation, stick together, or did they kind of intermingle with all the other people, non-Italians?
Well, when they put us in the barracks, you do it alphabetically. So I was in the first barracks, being my surname began with a C, and one fellow, Marty Byrne, he and I became good friends. He was from Newark, New Jersey. He was downstairs and I was upstairs, and just got to know one another. He was Irish, I was Italian, but we got along great for 50 years or so. So it was just who you were with, and nobody even thought about that, what your nationality was.
Do you remember your first day at Fort Bragg? Do you remember what was going through your mind and what happened when you first arrived at this training facility?
No, it wasn't. It was just routine. You're getting all your bedding and so forth, getting your spot in the barracks, and there wasn't anything.
How did the officers treat you, or the people?
Well, you see, in the barracks, you had on each floor you had a corporal and a sergeant. They had their own room at the end of the floor, and I remember the sergeant's name was Moody, his last name, and the corporal's name was Offutt. We used to call him the Offutt Corporal. That's how you were told what to do. They've been around. They were most of them in the regular army. And they told us what to do, and we did it.
Give me an example of some of your training after you were recruited and went to Fort Bragg. What types of things did you do?
We were on the 155 millimeter long tom cannon. That was an old World War I French type artillery weapon. And we were cannoneers, they call us. You work on the gun and clean it up, load it up, whatever you had to do. But it's an obsolete weapon. This was only for training. It wasn't used. That particular weapon was not used in World War II. That was an old one. In World War II, you used the 155 millimeter long tom. Eventually, it was on half tracks, and also the 155 millimeter howitzer, which was a shorter gun, and then the 105 millimeter howitzer. Those were the up-to-date artillery shells that were being utilized.
At Bragg, were you training on those howitzers, or
no,
only on the obsolete World War I?
Only on obsolete. This was only 13 weeks of training, and they weren't concerned about proficiency on any modern weapons, because that was going to come later when you go to your regular outfit. And but a couple of things happened at Bragg were kind of silly, I guess, in a way. I remember you asked about the first day. Well, I guess was the next week, we were in, right after Reveille, they said, anybody who has a driver's license, take one step forward. So I took one step forward. I figured, hey, maybe I'm going to get a Jeep or something. So they marched us down to the battalion motor pool and helped change the oil on the trucks. That's what we did.
Need a license for that.
So I said to myself, I got to be careful what I volunteer for down here. But it worked out, though. I remember one time I had a Jeep assignment that day for a message center, delivering stuff and what have you. And it was a drizzly day. It was late November, I guess it was. And I come back at lunchtime. I went and got my mess kit and started to walk up to the mess hall. And I get up close to the mess hall, and I see all these, because it was kind of drizzly, and I see these guys all standing outside. I said, what's going on? And no, I just finished my work in the morning, and I was coming back from my lunch. They said, we're not going to eat today. I says, why not? We're on strike. I said, you're on strike? And I figured, what am I on strike for? I want my lunch. So they had a session with the mess sergeant. He was a regular Army guy from Tennessee. He was staff sergeant. And he, as I say, somebody said something and it started, and he said, everybody outside, nobody lining up in the mess hall. So they retaliated and said, we're not going to eat your food. So there was no lunch for anybody that day. So that afternoon, around 3:30 or so, we were all told to go to the auditorium. So we all went to the auditorium, and there was this full colonel up there, Southern colonel, and he said to us, I could have all you men court-martialed for disobeying orders and so forth. And I'm sitting there, and I said, I had no lunch, I had nothing. And he's threatening us with court-martial. We're making $21 a month, and you take out 25 cents for the battery fund, and you take out $6 for laundry. And what do we wind up with? We got about less than $15. Well, how worse can you get? But he didn't court-martial anybody. But that proves, to answer your question, these guys are street smart. From New York City, Jersey City, Newark, and then New Jersey, in that area, they don't take anything from anybody, and they know how to retaliate, and that's what they did that day. Mm-hmm. They just wouldn't take any guff from anybody. That's why they told that mess sergeant where to get off at. I understand later on he was transferred.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you have any difficulty converting yourself to the military life, the daily regimens and the workouts and the training?
No. I was single, and that helps. You don't have to dwell on what's happening at home and all that kind of stuff. So it worked out pretty well.
And you were at Fort Bragg when you heard about Pearl Harbor.
Yes. That was a Sunday, I guess it was, the time differential there. But I know Moody and Offutt were running around. They ran to supply and got rifles and so forth, and they were ready for anything, I guess. Of course, we weren't allowed to have anything. So, but everybody was on alert that day.
Did you notice a mood change amongst the men from before Pearl Harbor and after Pearl Harbor? Did it become more serious, the training that you were doing? Was there more of a concern?
No, there wasn't that much of a change. Actually, I think that most of these guys were single, most of them at that time, and that didn't mean that much to them. Everybody wanted to finish their training and go someplace else. Mm-hmm. That was the attitude. They were wondering where they're going to go, because some of them probably wouldn't stay in the artillery. I know one guy. He was a bookish sort of individual. He wound up in Indiana in the finance division. He was a stockbroker.
What about your training specifically? You spent those 13 weeks at Bragg, Fort Bragg. What happened after that?
Well, about a couple of weeks before we were finished there, we got word that we were going up to Sackets Harbor on Lake Ontario and join a National Guard outfit as replacements. But there was about, 20 or 25 of us, and I was one of them. I said, no, you're not going. You're going to stay. You're going down to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, and join the 44th Infantry Division as replacements down there. That was the New Jersey National Guard outfit. Well, that kind of disappointed me, because here I've been with these guys for 13 weeks, and now they're going to put me as a replacement with people I don't even know. But luckily, 2 weeks later, after these other guys pulled out and went up to Sackets Harbor, they changed their mind, and we went up to Sackets Harbor, luckily. I was back with my group again, so that was fine. I didn't have to make new friends and so forth. And that's where we stayed for a while. And that was up near Watertown, New York. And it was the 258th Field Artillery Regiment. And we did pretty good. We had marches, and every time, of course, we were younger and stronger, we beat the old National Guard. Those guys were older. Of course, they had all the ratings. I was put in headquarters and as a fire direction control guy. And the guy who had that job, he was a staff sergeant. He didn't do the job. I was a private, and I was doing the job because they maintained their ratings. That was the only bad feature of it.
Tell me what the fire direction control person would actually do. What was their role?
Well, he would be in Fire Direction Control Center in the command post, and he would give out the commands, you know, left so much or right so much, and give the direction of the fire for the equipment, whatever it might be, whatever the cannons would be. And that's what a fire direction control guy would do. He would measure on a map exactly where the target is and what you need to get a weapon, the weapon to put a projectile on the target.
How did you come to be the one selected for that? It sounds like that's a more technical job. It takes a little more intelligence, perhaps. It takes a little more experience. Is because did you have some pre-war experience? To
No, but see, I was an accountant, and I'd gone to college for a couple of years during the evening when I was working at PPG. So I was good at figures and so forth, and that's what you have to do. So I was in the 258th Field Artillery Regiment, and they broke it up and then made up the other battalions, and the 258th became the 991st Field Artillery Battalion, and they started to bring the younger guys into it. And eventually I went to officer candidate school but after they shifted me to the 186th Field Artillery, they broke up the 258th as a regiment and made battalions out of it, and I went to 186th Field Artillery Battalion in fire direction control, and I got along real well there. In a matter of several months, they told me that I was okay for officer candidate school at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and that's where I went.
And so after New York, you went out to Fort Sill?
Fort Sill, Oklahoma for officer training, and I became a second lieutenant January 21st, I guess it was, 1943. And it was a kind of a odd coincidence on that I was good at fire direction, I guess, and the fellow I had met as a master sergeant in the 258th Field Artillery in headquarters, he was out there as a second lieutenant and teaching tactics. And of course I was in his class. It was a big class. So one evening there was a knock on the door in our hut. There was 6 of us in the hut. That's how they operated out in Fort Sill. And it was John Rice, Second Lieutenant John Rice. And everybody snapped to attention, you know, and it's all privates more or less. Well, reacted like privates. Some had better ratings. So he asked me to come outside, and he asked me if I'd like to stay there at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, as a gunnery instructor. I said, "Oh, no, John. No. Out here at Fort Sill, you want me? No. Thanks, but no thanks." I said, "I don't want to go." He meant well, but that wasn't for me.
Did you, during all of your training in both basic and OCS, did you receive training in small arms weapons?
Oh, yes.
What kind of weapons were you trained with?
Well, we had the carbine. I was a expert on the carbine and a sharpshooter on the .45 caliber handgun.
Did you have any pre-war experience with guns?
No.
And then tell me about after you graduated from Officers Candidate School, what happened next?
Well, we had a choice. They gave you a choice. There was a choice of 3 places you could go to. And one was a tank destroyer outfit in Camp Housie, Texas. And there was Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Was that a tank destroyer outfit too?
No,
or was that something else?
no. I'm trying to think of the third one, and I can't seem to think of what the choice was. It escapes me. At any rate, I chose Fort Bragg because that was in eastern part of the United States, and I figured I could get home a little easier from there. And so I went to Fort Bragg, and I went to the, then we made another choice there. I went to the 11th Airborne Division, Glider Field Artillery.
Wow.
That was a brand new outfit, brand new division. The only thing wrong with it was that I was surprised that all the men that came in didn't have any training. We had to give them basic training, and I wasn't happy with that. Usually, you get your basic training somewhere, then you go to a division. But here, they didn't do that. So I had to give them basic training. Of course, it put me in good shape. I was really running around and all that kind of stuff. Now, this was the Glider Field Artillery, and of course, you had the paratroopers for the infantry alongside of us. But eventually, I had to get out of that outfit because the atmosphere wasn't good with my my group, my battery commander. He was from Baltimore and so forth, and he got into a discussion with one of my friends there. He was a reconnaissance officer, and Bob Berry, and poor Bob, later on, he lost his eye in an accident. They were working on some bombs in a rehearsal, bivouac area. At any rate, I sided with Bob one night when we were out drinking with the general's daughter there. They had a dance, and I'm dancing and so forth, and so I shifted over to the 795th Field Artillery Battalion at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was glad to get out of there. I always tried to get something that I liked to do or wanted to do. And over at the 795th, I was there a while, and I met my buddy Angelo Cortese from New Jersey. I'd met him out at Fort Sill in OCS, and he was the executive officer of the battery, and it was a reunion, more or less. And we used to go home on weekends. I had my brother's car, and we go home, and we get some choice bottles of liquor from Andy's father at the tavern and bring them back. And we give them out to those we liked. And those who we didn't care much, we gave them the lesser brands.
Where were you, back in New Jersey at the time you were with the 795th?
No, still at Fort Bragg. Still at Fort Bragg.
Okay.
So one day at lunchtime, I was sitting there, and this lieutenant opposite me was saying goodbye to some of the others and so forth, and I didn't know him at all. I had seen him around. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to the Air Force. You are? How are you doing that? He said, they want officers as well as enlisted men for aircrew training. Oh, well, how do you get that? Now, you have to understand that this happened within if I hadn't been there that day, at that time, and watched them saying goodbye to this guy, I would never have known about this. So he said, all you have to do, Mike, is get an application and get a physical over at Pope Air Force Base, which was right at Fort Bragg, and send it directly to Captain Brown in Washington, D.C. Oh, is that it? He said, yeah. So Andy Cortese and I decided to do that. So I went first, and I got my physical. And Andy didn't pass. He had, I guess he'd been out drinking too much beer, so he had to go the next day for another physical. In the meantime, I took my application, and my physical was okay and so forth. And I went in to see the colonel, who nobody ever did like.
What was the colonel's name?
I can't remember his name. He was from Fort Sill. He was an instructor out there. He never had any combat but he was strictly he knew his paperwork. That's about all I could say for him. So I went in to see the colonel, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he said, Lieutenant, do you realize, I'll never forget this, Lieutenant, do you realize that the Army has spent over $5,000 to train you as a field artillery officer? I said, yes, I understand that, Colonel. But all you have to do, if you don't approve of this, just say it's not approved. There was a spot on the paper that said approve or disapprove. So he disapproved it. And I said, well, you can send it directly to Washington, D.C., to Captain Brown, so forth. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to send it to chain of command, up to brigade, and then it'll take care of itself. So I had to salute and leave. So the first thing I did was go out and see the master sergeant. And I told him my problem. I said, there's a paper coming out going up the brigade. My name's on it and so forth. That really should go to Washington, D.C. Now, I was taking a chance here. So I come out later that day. The master sergeant didn't do it. So the paper went up. So immediately I went over to Message Center and I saw this corporal. And I told him, no, but let me go back a minute. I went up to brigade, that's right. I went up to brigade and I saw this second lieutenant there, and I told him my problem about this paperwork should be going to Washington, D.C. He reached down, and the bottom drawer of his desk, he pulls out my paperwork, the blue paper. Oh, I said to myself, this is going to 3rd Army in Tennessee. That's the headquarters. It'll never get there. So I said to the lieutenant, there's been an error here, Lieutenant. That really should go to Washington, D.C. He said, oh, I don't know about that. I'll tell you what. So he marks it CO, Commanding Officer, 795th Field Artillery Battalion, and he sends it back. That's when I went over and I saw the corporal in the Message Center. I said, there's a piece of paper with my name, CO 795th. It's my name's on it. Get it and put it in my pigeonhole. Okay? He said, okay. If I see it, I'll do it. So that afternoon, around 5 o'clock, I go over. There it is in my pigeonhole. I put it in the envelope. I mail it to Washington. In the meantime, Andy Cortese, he's having conniptions because he said, oh, you're going to get court-martialed and so forth. I said, oh. So he goes in to see the colonel. The colonel said, I'm not signing any transfers, period. Because Andy was the executive officer of the battery. He said, no. He wouldn't even disapprove it. He wouldn't sign it. So Andy stayed there. About 3 weeks later, the colonel calls me into his office. He says, Lieutenant, I can't understand this. What's that, Colonel? I've got orders for you to report to San Antonio, Texas, for Aircrew Training. Is that so, Colonel? Yes. You got 10-day delay en route, and so forth. Everybody was astonished. I probably would have been court-martialed probably if I had been caught. But it worked out. I got 10 days. I went home to Newark, New Jersey, and for that weekend, my mother comes into my bedroom and says, "There's somebody outside to see you." And there's those 3 guys from Fort Bragg. They drove up to see me off.
Wow. What was it about joining an air crew that interested you so much that you would go through all of this trouble? Did you have a desire just to get out of the artillery, or was there something about planes and the Air Corps that
Well,
was interesting?
I thought about pilot training for a while there, but then it was just that I just didn't feel right in that outfit particularly. And I thought I'd get some training and see where I could go. Maybe a Navigator. Navigator seemed to be a good choice too.
Had you been in a plane before?
Oh yeah,
you had?
I've been flying commercially before that in my job and so forth. So I would, but the only problem here was that my orders, and I happen to have them here. It said I go to San Antonio, Texas, for Aircrew Training. In the event that I did not pass the physical or was so forth, I report back to my old outfit. There was no way I was going to take anything, whether it was pilot, bombardier, navigator, anything that they accept me for, so I wouldn't have to go back and face the colonel again, because you know what that would be. So it worked out that I took bombardier navigator.
You had the option of choosing whichever?
Yes,
whatever
you could pass the physical for. On depth perception, I was a little bit shaky on that, and that's imperative for a pilot, So.
And I assume that some of the experience that you got, reading map coordinates for the artillery helps you out.
Oh,
with
sure.
Bombardier now.
Oh, yeah. That was that's helpful. A knowledge of maps and things like that. But that was, and then I went through the aircrew training. The other reason I didn't go for pilot is because pilot takes too long. It would take an awful long time, and I was anxious to get overseas a little bit, But as I knew I could go through bombardier training, no problem with that.
Tell me a little bit about the training for the.
Well, it was in Texas, Ellington Field for several weeks, then at Childress Air Force Base up near Amarillo, and that was for the balance of that training and dropping bombs, practice bombs, and things like that. And you get dead reckoning navigation training as well. You get both of it. And I passed that. Then they assign you to a crew at Omaha, Nebraska. We crewed up with the people we didn't know, just navigators, pilots, gunners, whatever.
Do you remember the guys on your first crew, the one in Nebraska? And they were guys from all over the country.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're.
And tell me about
Here they are.
the officers on board your plane. Would have been the pilot, the co-pilot, the bombardier, navigator, and was there a fourth officer, the radio?
6 radio operator and 5 gunners. Well, it was a tail gunner, 2 waist gunners, belly. He was a tail gunner. He was a navigator. I was a bombardier on this one. He was a pilot, co-pilot. He was a flight engineer, and he was a nose gunner, waist gunner, and he was the radio operator. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the planes that you flew. What was the name of the plane that you flew?
Eventually.
The type of plane that you flew.
Eventually, not the training. The trainings were the smaller ones. That's just strictly for bombing. But B-24 Liberator, which was they made more B-24 Liberators than any other bomber in World War II. They used them both in the South Pacific and out of England, out of Italy, out of Northern Africa. I mean, but the B-17 Flying Fortress got a lot of publicity. We always used to say the B-17 had a public relations guy on each plane.
Yeah, a lot of people remember the Memphis Belle.
Right, the Memphis Belle, right.
So the guys that you met and were crewed up with at Omaha, those were the guys that you would fly with when you went overseas? Or some of them were?
Yes, the only problem with that was that after a while, I was over there, I flew about 4 or 5 missions with them. They took me off the crew and put me on what I call the Flying Misfits. And these were guys who, for one reason or another, they were sick or maybe they needed a couple of missions to finish their 35 or 30 if you're a lead crew. So John Corbett was he was a co-pilot, and he became ill, so he didn't finish up with his crew, so he was the pilot. I was the navigator, bombardier navigator, and these not these guys, but others who needed a few missions to finish out their 35 were put on there. See, and I had no choice, really. I didn't care. They promoted me to first lieutenant after I had a few missions. Then one day, this was kind of ironic. I see this guy all the time. Now I'm going to see him again when I go down to Savannah. Andy Andreessen from California. He said he slept a couple of beds away from me. He came in with his crew. And he said, Mike, you're flying with the colonel tomorrow. I said, what? This is Lieutenant Colonel Heber Thompson. He was our squadron commander, 713 Squadron. Yeah, he said he's coming back. He finished up his 30 missions as lead crew, and he went home for leave. Now he's come back, and he wants to fly an element lead, just for a little practice, get, hands-on. He said, Kaplan will be the co-pilot. Kaplan was down the other end of my hut, and he was a guy who didn't get along with his crew, and of course I didn't know this till later. So they moved him into our hut. He was the co-pilot. I was the bombardier navigator. Heber Thompson, who was one of the best pilots ever. He was a squadron commander. He was only 27. Wow. He was the pilot, and of course we got all these guys. Some I knew and some I didn't know. I wouldn't know who's going to show up to be a gunner or whatever. The nose gunner, I wouldn't know. So we went that day. We went to Hamburg, bomb, and I'll never forget that. We were on the bomb run. We hit the IP, the initial point, and all of a sudden, fog, nothing. I mean, I looked out the blister. I couldn't see anybody. We were element lead. We were in front anyway, on the high right. I look out, nobody. It was all just fog. I had the bomb bay doors open, and I'm waiting. Nothing to do. Finally, the pilot, the colonel says, close the bomb bay doors. And I guess the guys, he told the others, because I couldn't hear her, I'm done in the nose, to put the pins back in the bombs. Or I didn't know what he did, because I thought maybe he might want to drop them anywhere, somewhere, We're over Hamburg, and you go up to the North Sea. Wasn't very far. Then you get into the English Channel. So, and he said, give me a heading, home. So I gave him a heading of, there was 310, I think it was. So, okay, we started out. And still, couldn't see anything. I don't like fog. I don't know where, I didn't see one other plane. And we're up at 30,000 feet or whatever it was. And we'd go out. So we're going out, and luckily, just come over the German coast there, and a squadron, or maybe it was a group, a B-24s came by. You can tell by the tail markings that was part of our combat wing. We had about 5 groups in a wing. And I hear him said, pilot navigator, I'm going to tag on to this group. I said, okay. I said, Roger. Oh, I was so happy because we could see. So he tagged on. And I thought, well, what about the bombs? Isn't he going to drop them? But, you know, he's a lieutenant colonel. I guess he didn't want to drop bombs anywhere, you know. But I thought, we're going to take these back with us? I wasn't happy about that. So he tags on and he goes along a while. We're over the English Channel. We could drop bombs there. No. Not a word. Then he says, break away. He says, give me a heading home. So I give him a 270 heading or something like that. We went home. I never discussed it with him. After all, he's a colonel. We took the bombs back. I'll never get over it. That's the only time. I guess he felt, well, you can't drop bombs and waste it or hurt somebody or what. I don't know. You're the only one I've ever told that story.
Really?
Yeah.
And I guess you never found out why you did it.
I never asked. I'm going to ask him. What am I going to ask him for? Just say none of your business. Right?
Let's go back to when you first were deployed overseas. What unit were you assigned to at that point? Did you have a particular squadron that you were associated with at the point that do you remember what it
yeah. I was with the we went to we landed we flew over.
You didn't fly your own planes over though, did you?
We brought the new ones over. What you do, you go to Omaha, Lincoln, Nebraska. Well, it was Omaha, I guess it was. Yeah. No, but where was that? Yeah. And Wichita, Kansas. That's where it was. I couldn't think of it. And you get a brand new airplane. And that's the way of bringing the new airplanes over. So our whole crew got in there, and we stopped up in New Hampshire, refueled, so forth. We flew to Goose Bay, Labrador. Then we flew to Iceland. We overnight there. And then we flew over to Wales, and we got rid of the plane. And then we went up to the Belfast area. And then we were assigned to England, Seething Air Force Base, 448th Bomb Group. I was in the 713th Squadron.
Were you and the men of your crew happy that you were going to Europe as opposed to the Pacific Theater, or did you not have any feelings one way or the other?
No, I think we all were happy we're going to someplace where they're English speaking. You know, that's an advantage and better living, I guess. On
your first crew, was there one particular guy that you became very close to, or did you not have any really good, close personal relationships in that?
Old Hyde. I call him, his name is L.R. Hyde. I call him Little Rawhide. Lewis, he called me last week. And Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson he was a nose gunner, but he's got Parkinson's now. And
what was Hyde's role on the plane?
He was a navigator on the first crew I was with. Then he and I we were in the same hut, you know. We were fellow navigators, really. So I was checked out as a navigator, and I got a certificate and all that kind of stuff. So we stayed in the same hut, even though I wasn't flying with them anymore. I was alone with the Misfits.
Where did you fly your first mission? Do you remember? Does your first
They
mission?
all went, I got them all listed. They all went to Germany.
When would it have been? Do you know what approximately? I guess it probably would have been sometime in 43.
No.
Or was it
44?
Okay.
There they are. One day I sat down and see this book. John Rowe, he was a pilot. This was his crew, and he gave me this book. And those are his missions. Then I put mine down. The first one was back here, September the 12th, to Germany. They all were Germany after that.
What were your feelings on your first mission? Were you scared? Excited? Were you nervous?
No, I'm not that type of guy, really. My first mission, we went to, it was Eastern Germany. It was a small target. And I noticed on our right, this plane was going along, all of a sudden, you could see the flak, or the artillery, 88s hitting. It went bum, 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 bing. And the guy went down, hit his wing, but he pulled out of it way down, so I watched him, and I lost sight of him. But that's the way it was.
Another B-24?
Oh, yeah, all B-24s, all B-24s.
What did the flak look like? Was it?
It's like a puff of smoke. It just billows. And then you look, you go through this, and you look back and say, "Did I go through that?" You know, it rattles. It rattles against the plane. You know, just hope that it doesn't get a direct hit. You're always going to get some peripheral damage. You know, splatters, but just hopefully it doesn't hit an engine.
Did you fly out with fighter escorts when you were at this point, or had the Allied achieved air superiority that they didn't need to at that point?
Yes, we had. That was one of the best things that ever happened. We'd go over, and we'd get fighter escort coming from France would meet us well before the target, and that was a big advantage. And we were lucky. Depends on your place in the whole bombing run. I mean, the German fighters would come out. You know, if they catch you in the beginning, the guys in the back are going to escape it because they're all tied up with somebody, and with the P-47s, Thunderbolts, and the P-51, you know, and if you were unlucky and you happened to be there when the German fighters happened to decide to come out and fight, well, then you were in the middle of it.
Were you ever on board or on a mission when you were attacked by fighters, German fighters?
No, generally they'd stay their distance if they saw the P-47s and the P-51s. We were lucky. Well, I saw them in the latter part of the war, when they had the jets, but they weren't that good at flying jets yet, so they had those Me-262s out there somewhere, and they were experimenting with them. Hitler made a big mistake that he didn't get those jets before he did get them. He would have been much better off, but he didn't have them. I read an article once that said that he thought that he didn't need them particularly. But Goering, he fell flat on his face because he didn't have the fighter support that he needed. And the P-51s just took over.
So the waist gunners and the gunners on your particular planes didn't really fire their weapons too often?
Not too often, no. We were lucky. We were lucky.
Tell me a little bit about your responsibilities on a particular mission. You would be the one in charge with charting the course of the plane?
Well, what they did is they give you a map of that particular part of Europe, Germany and so forth, and they outline on it, and they sketch exactly the route. And they also, on occasion, would give you flak points where the German 88s might be. And the lead navigator would chart it out, and you'd follow along. And you always knew where you were based on what the lead navigator, if he was on course, you'd be on course. Usually they were, because you would know it. If he's off course, you would know that. But they did a good job of that. They did.
Were you ever on the lead Navigator, or were you
No,
mainly
no, I was-
traveling?
No, on the Misfits. They wouldn't. The only time, one time I was flying element lead, and the lead ship, the northern bomb site went out of whack. It was inoperative, so they asked me. So I got down, and I was going to start bombing for the group. But it was overcast, couldn't see a thing, so they dropped it by radar. Dropped the bombs by radar.
What was the northern bomb site? Was that was that new? Was that a new technology at the time?
Yeah, it's about this big. In fact, there's a buddy of mine had one. He died a couple of years ago, but he got one, and I was wondering what his widow was going to do with it. But it's about 2 feet wide and about a foot and a half high. And what you do is you synchronize it, and when the two guidelines meet, that's when your bombs drop. So what you do is focus on it and try to get the hairs on the target.
And that was located in the nose of the B-24.
Yeah, it was nose on the floor.
So when you were traveling, is that where you spent your time, or only when you were ready to bomb you would go?
Only when I was ready to bomb. When we hit the bomb run, what they call the initial point, that's when you get down there. You're down and you're rotating the knobs, trying to get the thing in synchronization.
Did you have a name for the planes that you flew? Did the men name the planes?
Well, ours was Old Pop 75. That's what.
Was this with the Misfits, or was this the original one?
There it is, Old 75.
Oh, and it had a picture of
an old guy. Yeah, but that wasn't my idea or our idea. We inherited this plane.
Oh, okay. So that was on there already?
It was on there, yeah.
When you got
it. We came later, so we weren't around to initially put all the good stuff on the nose, all the ladies and so forth.
The pin-up girls.
Pin-up girls, yeah, Betty Grable and the rest of them.
So what is the 70? Do you have any idea what the 75 was? Was that supposed to be the age?
75 missions.
75 missions.
That plane had flown.
Wow.
Up to that point, I think that's what it's.
Was that the plane that you flew with the Misfits, or was that?
Yeah,
okay.
Most of the time with John Corbett. He was from Harrisburg. I didn't know him before. And yeah.
What kinds of equipment were you issued with the expectation or the possibility of you being shot down? Did you have an escape kit, or did you have sidearms or anything like that?
I was just going to tell you, we used to carry a 45 gun, but then they decided that we turn those in, which I did, to the supply section, because when a guy went down in Germany with a 45, likely he would be killed, because he would probably grab the 45 and the Germans would see he had a 45 and they would shoot him down right on the ground. So they stopped that immediately when they had a few incidents like that, because the Germans used to take farm implements or brooms, whatever, they'd whack you. I know my old roommate, Mickey Schleicher, he was shot down in February 1945, and his name's Schleicher, German. So he got a few whacks, but at least they didn't bother him. If you were Jewish, you were in trouble. So you tried not to emphasize that.
How many missions did a traditional team or group fly?
35. Well, 35 for a crew. If you were a lead ship, there was 30. You could 30.
Were any of your missions particularly dangerous or difficult that stand out in your mind? Where there was a lot of flak or a lot of enemy resistance?
When you went to Hamburg or we went to the Ruhr Valley, you got a lot of flak. I went to Magdeburg 3 times, Hamburg 3 times, and you get a lot of flak when you're above the oil refineries. Hamburg had their oil refineries. Magdeburg had a lot of rail yards, marshalling yards they used to call them, where all the freight came together. And of course, the idea was to bomb them, and they stopped the supplies and oil and everything else from going through. Mm-hmm. And that's what hurt the Germans near the end of the war, because they didn't get the supplies they needed, and the Americans controlled the air, and that hurt them very, very badly.
Were there any type of rivalries in the Army Air Corps related to what type of plane you would fly? For instance, the B-25 guys, the B-24 guys,
There was
B-17
an intense
guys.
rivalry between the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberators, and there is to this day.
And you think the B-24 is more important plane?
Well, naturally, I'm a B-24 Liberator guy, but the B-17s, like the Memphis Belle, they got all the publicity. But they made more B-24s than they did B-17s. That we know, because they carried a heavier bomb load. They could fly higher, and they could fly farther. They were a better airplane, but they used to call them flying boxcars, flying coffins. But the B-17 looked a little more majestic, I guess. Maybe that's the B-17s. They had more fleet, and they had more of a shine to them, I suppose. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What kind of uniform did you wear when you were flying? Did you have like a bomber jacket? Or?
No, we had this electric flying suit. That's electric. You plug it in, and I carried it, and then this jacket over it. And
what was the point of the flying suit? It would keep a temperature, keep your temperature.
Well, you plug it in, electric heat. Yeah, it's heated. I was just going to say, if you could see you can't see it on here. The glove, you can't see. The boots had the boots on too.
And who had the highest rank in your plane? You were a first lieutenant at that time.
Well, we had the first lieutenant was about a captain for the pilot, and first lieutenant for the co-pilot, the navigator, and the bombardier generally. And then you had a staff sergeant for the radio operator and the flight engineer, and sergeants for the gunners, or staff sergeants sometimes.
What was the feeling like when you returned from a mission and safely landed in the airfield? Was it a feeling of relief and satisfaction and pride, or did it just become routine?
It became routine, sort of. And then, of course, when you came down, you get debriefing. You go, they interrogate you and ask you about what you saw. And, of course, I, as the navigator, would record. Like, for example, one day I see a plane maybe at 7 o'clock high. I count 4 parachutes, and I say to the guys, if I can't see, if it's starting to go, count the parachutes. Let me know, because I have the location and what time. And then what they do is that my report plus other planes coming in, they verify exactly what happened.
How many missions did you wind up flying?
35. 35.
And then what happens? Does the final missions? I mean, does that stand out in your mind because it was such an important one, that 35th mission? Or?
No, not really. It was kind of hectic. This was right after the Battle of the Bulge, and we were flying. I flew. Christmas Day, December 25th, 1944. I remember that. And then the next day, the Battle of the Bulge started December 16th, 1944. And I didn't fly I went down every day, about 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Waited, no mission. Then we go back. Then finally, December 24th, I flew, I remember. And we were just anxious to get them over with because those guys needed some help. And boy, I got a letter from Belgium from my friend Ed Shea. Ed had gone to OCS, but he didn't make it. He went back, he became a medic, and he was in Belgium. Sent me a letter, and he said, it made me feel good that day when I got that letter. He said, we came out, we saw all those planes. Oh, they were cheering. Yeah.
They needed any morale building thing that they could find.
Yeah. So they were stuck for a couple of weeks in there, I guess it was. Now I remember that third choice. I should have remembered it.
What was it?
The 106th Infantry Division.
Oh, really?
The 106th Infantry Division, if you know anything about what happened at the Battle of the Bulge, they took the brunt of it.
Right, the brunt of it.
They were a brand new division. They brought them in there. And I knew quite a few of those
You were in the
officers.
Army again, weren't you?
Yeah, they were on the right flank, and the 106th just brought in to relieve, and the Germans with the Battle of Bulge went through the 106th, and they had a lot of casualties, and a lot of the guys from my OCS class went to the 106th. I didn't make that choice. I went to Fort Bragg. I just dawned on me. I couldn't remember.
It sounds like you would follow daily what was going on the western front and what the infantry was doing and what.
Yes.
Was there a feeling in your with your colleagues and comrades about some of what the generals were doing, what Eisenhower was doing, what Patton was doing?
No.
Was there, you focused more on your role and your responsibilities?
Right. We didn't talk much about that. Probably didn't know that much about it. It was going on.
And after you flew your 35th mission, what was the protocol? Then you don't have to fly any more missions? Do you leave the Army? What happens?
No, you go back for rotation. What they do automatically, they put on my rotation slip suggestion or qualified as an instructor. They put that down just automatically. But something happened that it was real bad. That I'd finished up, and I came into the barracks into my hut one day, and I walked in. It was in the afternoon. I was waiting for my orders to go back to the States. And I walked in, and right across from where I was sleeping, my bed, there was two guys from the supply section there, and they were getting the foot lockers and the clothes for the Smirnsky's crew. There was four. There were four on that crew, and they went down. Two planes went down that day. It was a shame. Smirnsky was killed, and most of his crew, and his co-pilot had just been married, several weeks before he came overseas. And it was a shame because what happened was that Lieutenant Gaines, and it's all marked in this book because I knew about it though. He got hit with a 20 millimeter cannon shell, I guess, and it caught him and somewhere in the arm or so whatever. Anyway, he went down, and he took Smirnsky's crew with him underneath. The two of them, two planes went down. That's 20 men approximately. They went down. I think there was two that survived down there, but It was bad. I came in and I was shocked. I mean, there was one guy down the end in his bunk sitting there, and I knew what had happened when I see her taking her, because immediately when a crew goes down, you go in and take their stuff, because these guys, some of them, if they know somebody's not coming back, they're unscrupulous to go in and take their stuff. So I was in shock. Smrinsky was a good friend of mine. He and I used to kid one another. He wanted to go to Sweden. And I say, Smrinsky, you're a lot of bull. Yeah, Mike. I never knew his first name until later. His first name was Irving, and he was a first lieutenant pilot. And we went to Peenemünde. That's it, Peenemünde, where von Braun was assembling his rockets, V1s and V2s, and we bombed that. And I said, "Hey, there's your chance." That's up close to Sweden now. 2 weeks later, we go to Kiel, Germany, for the submarine pens. I said, "You're a lot of bull. You had your chance then. Kiel's closer to Sweden." And yeah, he didn't go. We were just too bad, though. Never had a chance. He was on his 19th mission, I think it was, yeah. Shame.
So there always was that possibility that you could be hit by a cannon or an 88, even though the Allied forces had air superiority.
Oh, yeah. This was, it happened to him a week after I finished up. Yeah. Let me tell you about this picture. This is funny. This happened November the 8th. There I am with the fatigue uniform and a hat on KP that day. There's my cousin Pat. We came in the same time. We were inducted. He gave the mess sergeant $3 so he could get off and see his girlfriend when she came. These are all our relatives. Most of them are gone now. These two are still living.
And that was taken right before you...
Fort Dix, New Jersey on Saturday. My mother, my dad, my sister, and my aunts, my uncle Mike. Yep.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your World War II memories.
Well, I hope it's been helpful.
It's been very interesting. Thanks so much, and thanks for your service.